All right. Thanks for checking us out at Old State Salooncast, one of our very, very first podcasts we're doing. It's kind of a weird thing from a Christian bar owner's perspective, which some people can't even handle that concept. But we have Ian Carroll here. And, as one of our first guests, it's like hitting it out of the park. So I'm going to really enjoy this conversation. Thanks for coming, Ian.
Totally. Thanks for hosting me, man. The event last night was awesome, and the whole experience so far is awesome.
So we invited you out a while ago, and some things got delayed and everything. In between that time, Heterosexual Awesomeness Month happened. So we gained a little bit more attention from people. But when we first reached out to you, we had two people following us, and we had this idea. Had this idea of bringing people together in a physical space to talk about things that people normally don't talk about unless they're in like the corners of the internet or X or whatever. So that was the reason for inviting you out, was because of your uniqueness in the way that you dig up and share information and share truth, and to do that in front of a crowd and then give that crowd an opportunity in a real space to look you in the eye and ask questions. That happened part 1 and 2 on the first night. Last night, what are your thoughts?
I think that the internet is great. The internet gives us this opportunity to share so much beyond borders and beyond all the limitations that humans have sort of been bound by for so long, for all of human history. But the internet is not real. And there's a different interaction you have when you're with someone in person, when you're hugging someone, shaking someone's hand, meeting them, talking to them. And it's not just a difference in the amount of the way conversation can flow and the way you can read body language, but it's also a difference in just the spirit of what has happened between you, and in the human experience of realizing that you're not alone, of realizing that a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what I do is sort of like the kind of things that when you learn it, you're told you're crazy, or you're told you're wrong, or you're told you're, racist, or whatever it is. And that is it's an experience that makes you feel so alone if you're not surrounded by people that can, treat you like a human. And the reality is that a lot of times when you're in person, you're way more inclined to treat people like humans in the first place. You're way less inclined to troll people and to make mean comments and to just, And so when you're confined to the internet to talk about these things, and you don't feel comfortable, or you don't have a community, a space where you can kind of, seek the truth and talk about what's actually going on, you're confined to this space where vitriol is encouraged and rewarded, and you have nowhere to be reminded that you're a human and these are regular human thoughts and that these are just ideas. And you creating that space is, I think that there are some people around the world in various different niches starting to realize this, that we need to create physical spaces, because it doesn't just remind all of the audience members, everyone that got to come, that they are not alone, but it also reminds the speakers that can come that they're not alone. And it inspires other people to go out and talk in real life about it, and to go and have real human conversations about it.
Yeah. So I think it's not just that physical space, but also setting up a welcoming environment for those types of conversations to happen, because you can have a space that people go to, like church or whatever, on the weekends, and it's a space. And we were talking about this the other day, is that it's funny that we kind of live in a world where people are driving to church, and these are the people that they're supposed to be doing the most intense part of life with, and they're driving to church and having a conversation saying, okay, to the family, don't talk about this and don't talk about that, and definitely don't talk about how we feel about Big Pharma or whatever, because we don't talk about those things at church. So it's not just simply having a public space or getting together in a public space, but it's getting together with intention and being intentional about talking about things that we need to figure out as a society.
Absolutely. I think what you're describing there is what I would call conformity culture. And I think there's just a natural human tendency to form groups where you try to conform. And you're right that if you don't actively set up spaces where you intentionally create a more intellectual culture, and sometimes, you don't always want to be talking about the hard stuff. You don't always want to be seeking the deepest truths, but we need a space where we can do it. And you need to be intentional about setting that up, because everything in culture is about not letting that happen right now. So
Right. Sometimes you need to talk about how beautiful nature is and
Yep.
how people can live out there
Yep.
off the land,
Yep.
which may be coming up soon.
Yep.
So after last night, we came back to the house here, and you've been. By the way, this guy's one of the most humble guys I've ever met in my entire life. So,
Oh, thanks, man.
he took and accepted an invitation to come speak with us here when we just had nobody who was following us, and he just liked what we were doing, and he came out and did that. So night 1 is done. Night 2 is coming, which we'll get to that in a second. But after night 1, you came back to the house here, and I have 6 kiddos, and 5 of them were there, and we kind of sat there in the kitchen. And what time was it? 11:30, 12, whatever.
Oh, it was midnight by the time that we finished talking, hanging out. We probably got home at like 10:30 or 11, I think.
And what a great conversation, and a big blessing to them. And one of the things I love about doing what we're doing is having really cool people come and give my kids an opportunity to ask them questions. What'd you take away from the conversation last night?
I almost asked more questions than them by the end of the conversation, because I'm always fascinated. So as a sort of ex-teacher, as a teacher, I'm always fascinated by what are the factors that create intelligent young people. And I was immediately struck by how direct and like respectful and brave is the wrong word, because it's not like your kids were brave. It's just that your kids were not afraid of the world, and they weren't afraid of people, and they treated me like a human immediately and introduced themselves and just started like having great conversations even before we were, sitting down. Like even when I'm coming in to get breakfast and they're like, "Hey, this good to meet you. What's your name?" And that's so rare that I immediately recognized it and was like, well, how did you guys make these people? Like, how did you raise these young people? Because I think that if there's a lot of things we need to do in our world, and one of the highest things on that list is raising higher quality young people that will inherit the world from us and keep the work that we're doing going. And so I was just so struck by how like engaging the conversation was, how great their questions were, and how like open and unfiltered and real all the responses were. I really felt like I was welcomed into a family as a member of the family, and there was no like how you're saying, like you go to church and they're sort of like, okay, don't like, we need to create this look of what's really going on. And instead I was welcomed into this family where everyone knows each other's differences and loves and respects each other, even amongst, those differences, which I purposely prodded at a little bit and asked about a little bit.
Right.
And I felt quite clearly that I was not getting a filtered version of this family. I was getting, just your guys' truth and your curiosity, and getting to interact directly with such a blessing.
I'm a big fan of being blunt and truth. So I think that's one thing I'm thankful the kids have picked up.
Yeah.
So one of my daughters, some of my kids really don't like any exposure online or anything like that. They don't want to be any photos that are posted and everything. And I think that's a common thing now when kids are realizing. We went through this time period where parents were just putting so many photos of their kids online, and now kids are like, wait, now I'm a teenager and there's these photos of me, and it was like a first in history, and nobody knew. But anyways, you have some that are a little bit older now, and they don't like the fact that there's these photos and things like that. And so I totally respect that. I get that. Mm-hmm. But one of my daughters, her name's Nora. She actually, she's excited about those types of things, and she asked to be on here with us in this podcast.
Yeah.
And we decided not to. But I know one question that she would ask would be, describe to us, who do you want to get married, and describe what your perfect wife would be like.
Dude, Nora's such a legend. I mean, if the internet wasn't the internet, I would be so stoked to have any and all of your kids in this podcast, because realistically, like the conversation we had the other night was the coolest conversation ever, and everyone would love to see and hear that. Mm-hmm. But you're right, the internet is the internet. And Nora, that is totally the question she would ask. And I think about it all the time, in terms of not like, I think a lot of people think of dating as this, like, they think of it as dating, right? As opposed to like planning an entire life, like planning a family, planning your whole future. And a lot of my life has been sort of slowly figuring out for myself that your happiness depends the most on who you pick to live your life with. It doesn't depend on your career as much. It doesn't depend on, your wealth as much. It doesn't, like, all of those things are secondary components to who you choose to build a family with and go through life with, because it's the people that really make the experience. And that's the person that's going to be there all along the way. And raising kids is going to be the most meaningful human experience you're ever going to experience. And I know that from having been a teacher and watched, that go south and north, so to speak, for lots of parents. And the thing about finding the right partner like this, so what are the qualities that you look for in a great partner? And I know you don't think of it this way because we've talked about this a fair bit, but I think too many people think of it as like, what am I looking for out there? What do I want in my partner? And if you don't match those boxes, then you're not the right partner for me. And no one is turning that around and saying, what kind of partner am I? Right? Like, who am I going to attract in this world? Like, what kind of value am I going to give to that relationship? And how will I contribute? Because if you're not the man that's going to attract the woman of your dreams, then you have no business being with her. And even if you were to find her and somehow get her to be with you, she wouldn't be happy because you're not providing what she deserves and wants. And so I think too many people look outwards at what can I get and don't look inwards at what can I give. And the moment you turn and look inwards at what can I give, you start to realize that actually this, at least the way I look at it, it's not necessarily about who's my ideal partner. It's actually kind of more about to whom am I the ideal partner? And suddenly you start to realize that if I want a partner that's going to be the best mother to my children, that means I need to be the most high quality human that I can possibly be so that I am the perfect partner for an extremely high quality woman that's going to be a great mom someday. And that starts to change the whole equation into how can I work on myself to be the best contribution to that partnership in the future when I find it. And like, you get some criteria. Like, I don't want you to lie. I want you to value, contribute. I want you to like, there's all sorts of things that I expect I will find when I find that woman, things that I'm attracted to. But you don't get to choose who falls in love with you. All you get to choose is who you become for them to fall in love with, right? And so I have over time taken that equation, flipped it on its head, and turned it away from like, stop looking for partnerships in women because you're going to meet all kinds of partners out there, all kinds of people out there, and you're not going to be able to control how they feel about you. All you're going to be able to control is who you are while you're around them and contribute. And this is true of your friendships too. Like, how do you contribute to your friendships and the people you spend time with, the things you do? And the more you can contribute a high quality contribution to the world as you walk through it, the more amazing all the connections you form will be. And some of those connections will be with amazing potential partners. And if you're contributing well, I think that the skill then is to realize that you're not going to get a million shots at this. And there will be people coming through your life that you're going to need to seize on the opportunity to bring them into your life, or that opportunity might leave. And that's true of friends, and that's definitely true of romantic partners. And I think that the actual skill is not what do I want in a partner, in a wife. It's who am I to attract the people I want in my life? And have I built the skill to notice when something that may never come back is passing through my life and to seize on that? Because you don't get to choose, but you do get to roll the dice of life, so to speak, to, walk the line and hopefully not miss the most amazing opportunity that passed you by.
We've kind of brought up our kids to think of this as like dating would be not dating the way the world says it is, of course. It's dating with intentionality of trying to understand, is this person somebody that I would marry? Yeah. Otherwise, if it's anything other than that, it's most likely going to be damaging and cause baggage and things later on. We, biblically speaking, Bible says, marry the love of your youth. If that right relationship happens, and it's so. Right now, I'm super excited because most of my kids, they really want to find that person. I think they've got good grasp on it, and they understand the dangers of the dating game and how that can be damaging in the future. And for me, the most important thing that I know that I can do for them in this process is love their mom. And when I say to them, marriage, when you get married, you have to be ready to completely destroy who you are and build up one entity of two people together with Christ, preferably, as the head of that marriage. But you can't go into a marriage and have a healthy marriage if it's like you're saying, it's like, what am I going to get out of this? Or how does, what's going to fit? This is my life and I need someone that fits nicely in my life. That's not the right way of looking at it. It's really going to be completely tearing down who you are. And so, the longer you go on in life, the little bit more challenging that's going to be because you're used to the way that you are and you have to tear that thing down. So, um, so I think I'm pretty happy with them. They're all excited about getting married and
they're wonderful,
having kiddos
they're
and everything else. So
yeah, and I think that even if you life is hard and complicated, and even if you stumble a little along the way, at least if your intention is this truer form of trying to find a relationship that means the most in the world, that protects you so much from the prevailing cultural narrative that dating is just this thing you do for fun to just sort of like essentially kill time and not think about your future, in the same way that we have people kind of kill time and not think about their future in their sort of educational career path and their monetary future. Like, don't think too much about finance. You don't need to know about it until suddenly you're 30 and you realize, I wish I had learned about finance when I was 20, 18, 14. In the exact same way, people are winding up being 30 and realizing like, oh, I've just kind of screwed around, like figuratively and literally, for the last 10 years. And like, what do you really have to show for it? Like experience, like bunch of drama and baggage and stuff. And then you realize like, man, I really wish I could find a partner. And I just spent the last 10 years not even looking. And I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that a lot of us have a lot of personal work to do within ourselves to just even become the kind of partner that you would hope to find. But I think that you do make a great point that if you get too set in who you are, that starts to just make it harder and harder to think of yourself as a part of a union instead of as an individual who is like getting this because then you start to get in all these problems where you're married but you still think of yourself as an individual. It's like, what's this marriage going to do for me? Like, is this person of the same quality as me? Like, can I do better? And all these thoughts that just destroy what a marriage and a family are built on. Right.
Yeah. So when you go to a foundation of beliefs to pull from to make decisions in your life, how would you describe that at this point, or spiritual journey, or where are you at with like that type of stuff?
These are great questions. This is like the most forefront journey in my life right now, because I was raised an atheist and not from the perspective of like God is evil or religion is evil at all, just from the perspective of two parents that were raised kind of in religious backgrounds that were sort of overblown and didn't work for them the way it was. And they're from the boomer generation. And so their parents were in the wars and stuff like that. And so I was raised kind of in the church of science, which is this really, I mean, in the zeitgeist right now, it's a fascinating debate, so to speak. And where I've always been the kind of person that has to understand things for myself and has to arrive at the decisions, the logic for myself, hence my whole platform. And that is the fundamental principle of science, is that we can observe things and we can learn from them and we can extract understanding about the world from them. And I think a lot of people stop halfway down the road of science, where science obviously means there is no God, right? And I think that is just because you haven't gone far enough down the road of science to realize that the further down science you go, and this is happening for a lot of people right now, you quickly start to wind up in a spiritual place and understanding that all of these various books in different religions, to different degrees, these different stories, these different theologies and beliefs are very much the highest form of metaphysics, the highest form of science. And suddenly science starts to evaporate into this far deeper human experience. And so my belief in science, I suppose, as a young person, has sort of inherently walked me towards the realization that I'm missing one of the most important parts of the human experience, which is spirituality. And simultaneous to that, my understanding of science, and because I'm starting to do all this research, has suddenly progressed to the point where now I'm realizing, actually, this is arriving right back at religion and spirituality. And we were just obscured. The path has been obscured as though those things are separate. And there is lots of evidence of God. And there is lots of evidence of a lot of these stories that get, that the, shall we say, intellectual world would say are just religious fables. But actually, I'm starting to see a path where my understanding of religion and spirituality is one and the same as my understanding of science. And both start to blend together into realizing that the way I see it, um, churches and establishment religious organizations throughout history have done a lot to serve the powerful. And many of them are wonderful organizations that help people.
Mhm.
But across history, they have, in some ways, been a force to obscure the truths of religion too, because a lot of the truths of religion are universal and are inherent within us and don't require an authority figure to, like, the authority figure is God, not the church. The authority figure is that voice within you that speaks to you that you can always hear when you're doing right and when you're doing wrong, right?
Mhm.
And the way I see it, what I believe is that we've been tricked into not realizing that that voice inside of you is the voice of God. And I don't mean that you are God. I mean that we are all tuned into this consciousness, this thing, whatever you call it. If you call it, the ether, if you call it the consciousness field, if you call it God, if you call it, whatever your words for it are, that voice knows what's right and wrong. And that's the voice that will judge you on your deathbed, because that voice, that truth saw your entire life. You cannot hide from that voice, right? Because we're all plugged into that truth of right and wrong every moment of our lives from the day we're born. And you can have a scientific take on that. It's in your brain, networks, neurons, whatever. You can have a religious take on that. It doesn't matter. It's still true, right? And our society today has trained us to ignore that voice, to quiet that voice, to numb that voice with drugs, with pain, food, whatever it is. And so we have a society where we have tricked everyone into not calling that voice God,
Mhm.
even though it's the same thing in all of our heads, and that is the voice that knows right from wrong. And we all experience it the same way. And they've sort of turned it into like science is the only thing that's real, and explain that just through neurons and science. So we're no longer connected to God, even though we can literally hear God speaking to us in our head every day,
Mhm.
regardless of which name you give to God. And that allows you to, because that voice is your connection to your moral truth, right? To know right from wrong. And you have that inner shame, that inner guilt, that inner, like, I saw myself do that thing that I'm ashamed of. And that is God witnessing you doing that thing that you're ashamed of. And you can never escape from that witnessing, right?
Yes.
Because it's inside of you. And you know this.
Yes.
And when you trick people into not realizing that that thing inside of you, that is this higher power.
Yep.
And that allows people to disconnect what they do in the real world, their actions, from the moral truth, the truth of your actions that you'll be judged by on your deathbed. You'll judge yourself by it, and God within you will judge you, because I don't care what your words for it are. Like, it's all inside of you, and we all have it. And the only way you don't is if you train yourself to ignore it over and over and over and over and over.
Mm.
And so I'm on this personal journey right now of getting all of the, like, obviously I work on the internet. Like, I work in a world where I live in America and I work on the internet, and I have to interact with the world that is kind of contrary to that inner voice in a lot of ways. Because I think a lot of that, like, that voice gets louder and louder the more time you spend in silence.
Mhm.
It gets louder and louder. Let's call it prayer or meditation or whatever your belief system is, right? And that voice gets louder and louder the healthier you get, and the more whole your sort of physical body systems, like the more you exercise and eat well. All of those things help your natural body systems that produce your energy, your, like, vitality within you. That helps it get louder too. So I'm on this personal journey of trying to make that voice louder in myself and get tuned back into that voice. Because as a young person, I thought of it as like I'm an extremely moral person that had this really loud sort of sense of inner right and wrong. And what that was, it was a really loud voice of God, right? If you think about it. And throughout life, as I went through my 20s, I, not really intentionally, but I just allowed, and I think we all kind of do this if you don't find God and intentionally, seek to stay connected, is we all sort of just let that slip, because we all accumulate disappointments. We all accumulate, like, things that we hoped we could become that we didn't become. And so slowly that voice that, is telling you what your higher self can be, like telling you that you can believe in yourself. You can go do that. You know what's right here. You should do the right thing. All of those times, every little opportunity to do the lesser thing in your life, the lesser thing for what's right in the world, whether that's achieving a lot or whether that's being, truthful, whether that's being kind, the more you accumulate transgressions against that voice, engage with the devil, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
in a Christian sense, the more that you learn to ignore that voice, because it's pretty uncomfortable to listen to that voice and actively go against it when you know that your soul told you that was the wrong thing to do, but you did it because it felt good, or you did it because it got you ahead in
Well, they
life,
say
right?
the slippery slope,
Exactly.
right? So, and then it gets steeper, and then
Yep.
it's just harder and harder to avoid falling down that
Yeah.
slope.
And when you have a godless culture, you invite everyone in that culture. And I'm not being denominational. I don't care what denomination you fall into. The point is that when you disconnect people from God in any form, you invite them to let those transgressions against their soul add up over time. And inherently, kids have a higher sense of morals than adults because they're closer to that source when right and wrong is like loud within your. And obviously, they need guidance. Like kids need guidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because they need to learn how to hear that voice and do the right thing by that voice, by God, not because they don't hear it, right? Kids hear it very loudly. And that's why their emotions are so powerful. And that's why they, experience life so fully. But the older we get, the more we let that voice numb out if we don't actively connect with it. And our whole country right now, although fortunately there's a big awakening of people that are, reconnecting, but our whole country is sort of like collectively disconnected and collectively allowed itself to walk further and further and further down essentially the path of the devil, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, you mentioned a couple things. First, that there seems to be like God wrote into the code, our code, an understanding of, or a conscience, a more moral compass, so to speak, and we can choose to ignore that and push that away, or get lured in another direction, and that's sin. And then it's kind of like we're coded, and we have this understanding that there will be a judgment, there will be a reckoning for the wreckage that we cause in our lives, and so that's a thing that we have to face, and throwing the Christian part of that in there is like that. I think that we also have this code written into us where we understand God is loving. If you look at nature and animals and the way that humans are, they want love, they want affection, they want children, and there's just a bond between humans and the way that they act, especially families and everything. And the design of love is pretty amazing, and that comes from a loving God. So that loving God knows he has to be a righteous judge, and he can't cheat and let somebody off. There has to be a punishment. And so that's where his son living that perfect life, taking that punishment for us. And so that's the loving thing. He's like, you deserve this. You're going to get this unless this is the sacrifice, my own son. And so that's where Jesus comes in, dies on the cross. He takes that punishment for us. So instead of us getting that punishment on our deathbed, like you mentioned, Christ takes it for us, and we therefore don't have to spend an eternity separated from a perfect, holy God. And we get to spend eternity with the perfect, holy God. So, I wish I could snap my fingers and everybody would know that and believe that and everything, but there's just a different path for everybody, and the Holy Spirit's involved, and that's outside my control for sure. But yeah.
Well, one observation I want to point out before we move on, is that I mentioned this last night, is I make a point of noticing when I meet a family that is extremely like familial, that is real and connected and raising healthy kids, and not in the way where it looks that way on the outside and you get inside and you realize there's all this like problems, like those exist too, but more and more in today's modern world, the families I meet that feel the most like a family is supposed to feel, where the parents and the kids love each other and the kids are healthy and happy and connected, and you sit down after dinner and like play games or talk or whatever it is, more and more those families are religious families. The ones that I'm coming across that are those real families, the families that I meet that I'm like immediately, I would aspire to have a family as cool as this family. And I'm not saying that, families that are non-religious are bad, there's all kinds. I'm just saying that more and more we wind up with not realizing that, what your family does after dinner is you go off all to your own rooms, you get on your phones and you play your games, and you text and do whatever. And that's cool, but it's not like that's not cool. And I would aspire to be the man that attracts the partner, to bring it all full circle here, that shares the values that I want to raise a family where after dinner we play games and talk and share and laugh.
Yeah.
Right. and, we still live in the real world. Like I work on the internet, but like I'm raising kids that understand that this is humanity, right?
Yeah, well, I also want to point out I'd be a liar if I didn't say that sometimes that's the way it is in our house too.
Yeah.
Everybody goes off in their own
Yeah.
corner and does things, but
Yeah.
you just want to hopefully make it so that often that there is that,
Yeah. Or
family
even
gathering.
ever, like as a start for some people.
There you go. Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of families, there's never even, and I think we don't realize that we're creatures of habit, right? And just like we're talking about, where you let the voice of God kind of fall out of your life and you sort of let these little transgressions add up, those are habits, right? And it's a habit to, finish your dinner, put the plate in the sink, not wash it, and go off to your room and start texting. Or it's a habit to, wash the dishes with your parents there or with your kids there and ask them some questions about their day, and just, habits build just by choices. And I think that a lot of us never even start to build the habit of connecting with your family, which is the closest people in your life, let alone, other networks, communities, friends, etc.
So you mentioned the religion of science, and I'm looking at your shirt and it says defund Big Pharma. Big Pharma being, the science,
The experts.
capital S, the experts. Yes. Tell us about your shirt.
Oh man, where to even start? COVID broke a lot of people's brains open, and mine is no exception. I was starting to think for myself a little bit before then, but COVID gave us time, and COVID gave us some pretty glaring holes in what we were being told. And I have always been a unmedicated person, as in I've always been wary of drugs and of medications and of just it. The racket was apparent to me as a kid, partially because I've always been an active and reasonably healthy human, and pretty immediate, and grew up on home cooked food. My parents did a great job of home cooking our meals and sharing dinner times together. And when I was a kid, I hated it. I always wanted Kraft mac and cheese, and all I got was home cooked meals, and that was one of the things they would not budge on. And as I started to grow up, I started to realize and look around that, interesting, I'm the one that's not medicated, and I'm the one that's fit, and I'm the one that can, take up snowboarding and be good at it this year because I'm healthy.
Right.
And so those things started to click on the way to 2020. And when 2020 comes around, I'm being told that and we know some of the facts at that point ish, that, the young are not at risk, the healthy are not at super high risk, and comorbidities are what are hurting people. And so things are just starting to add up to where young, healthy people are doing fine. And actually getting healthy is the number one thing to do. And then we're closing gyms down, and we're telling people not to go outside, and we're not talking about vitamin D, and we're not talking about eating healthy, and things start to add up and add up and add up. And so that was a huge part of me waking up and starting to ask questions. And the problem is that once you start to wake up and ask questions and you look at what's really going on with Big Pharma, you arrive at some really dark places. And it's hard not to be conspiratorial about it, because there's the base level conspiracy of, obviously they're going to make more money if we're sick, because you don't cure a customer,
Right.
You keep a customer. But the thing that gets me is when you start to look at the current push for transgender surgeries and medications, and pushing them on more and more younger and younger people. And I'll say that I have compassion for everyone's space in life. Like, I have no issue with people, with adults that arrive at that conclusion on their own. Like, I will still respect you as a human regardless, especially if you'll respect me as a human. I'm friends with all kinds of people. But I am concerned by the amount of money that Big Pharma makes off of every single person that decides to be transgender, because you're choosing that for the rest of your life. There's no turning back. And it is deafeningly, the silence is deafening on how much we are not talking about the monetary incentive of Big Pharma to get more people on puberty blockers, to get more people doing transgender surgeries, because there is no coming back from that. And your hormones are your whole life, and your hormones are what create your happiness, your motivation, your brain health. Like, your hormones control everything. That's the point of a hormone, is that it goes through your bloodstream. That's what defines a hormone, is it's a chemical in your bloodstream that determines all sorts of different things all throughout your body. And so the moment you start messing with your hormonal systems, you are risking depression and suicidal thoughts. You're risking low motivation. You're risking like all kinds of mental disorders, because your hormones are what regulate all of that. And we know that our world is full of chemicals coming from all the corporations that are putting chemicals in our food, letting chemicals leach into our water, into our products, and all of these things. And many of them are hormone disrupting chemicals, right? And so Big Pharma is profiting off of that part of the problem, off of all these hormone disruptions that are in our world. But those hormone disruptions, like one of the funniest things, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but it's a worthy tangent. There's this kind of ironic thing that doesn't get talked about outside of the bodybuilding world. But bodybuilders have known for a long time that hormonal therapies, steroids of various forms, can totally change your sexuality, right? There are inside jokes in the bodybuilding community that if you take tren, you can switch to being gay while you're on that hormone. Just because it just messes with your internal systems and wirings. And there are hormones that like make your whole understanding of gender kind of flip around. And the bodybuilders have known this for a long time. It's a running joke. And it's like, they laugh at it and make jokes about it all the time. Cause it's like, because I mean, a lot of them still choose to take it because they're going to get absolutely giant and gassed. And they're like, yeah, let's go. I'm going to like, let's do it. And they'll take the jokes and whatever. But that is not different than the fact that the hormones that are leaching into everything else, like Alex Jones talking about they're turning the frogs gay, like that was not just a meme. Like there are chemicals that disrupt your hormone systems in ways that mess with your gender identity and gender understanding, gender preferences, etc. And so we are definitely silent about all the chemicals that are getting leached into our world that are poisoning our hormonal systems, causing all kinds of problems, including problems with our understanding of gender within ourselves, within our spirit and soul. And then that creates this opportunity for a solution that they will sell you, which is, don't worry, you're fine just like that. We'll just do a little snip, snip and a little cut, cut. Even if you're young, it's fine. You can consent to that. And like the point is that that's the biggest money market in the world because there's no coming back from it. In the same way that like if you get depressed, you get prescribed this pill, you know, and that pill is pretty addictive and hard to quit. But it's a lot more addictive if you actually cut your testicles off and no longer have the opportunity to even produce the thing that the pill was replacing in the first place. And we are now pushing that to younger and younger kids in ways that are seditious and insidious. And like kids are manipulable. Kids are impressionable. Kids don't know how the world works yet. And kids have all kinds of crazy feelings when they enter puberty. And so it used to be normal. Like tomboys used to be normal, right? It used to be normal to just be weirded out when you were in puberty. And now we have medications for all of it. And some of them there's no coming back from. And so that's where I start to go from like Big Pharma is just out there for profit. And I start to wonder, like, is Big Pharma intentionally destroying our world, intentionally destroying our families and our kids? Like, is there something more seditious in there? Because it is like once you start coming after the kids, that's when I draw the line.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say I think it's spiritual, and so Satan giving a certain power and ability to deceive people and to put this blanket of deception through multiple industries and putting people in high positions, including Big Pharma.
Yeah.
And if I'm Satan and my enemy is God, the Creator, Father, I'm gonna want to mock His creation, and I'm gonna want to get boys to be girls and girls to be boys. Yep. And I'm going to want to get men to lust after men that they think are women and vice versa. And that to me, you know, it seems like when you look at all the things going on in the spiritual battles that are going on, and it's like this war of spirituality, and it's considered a battlefield victory for Satan to get people to mock the creation, mock the Creator. So anyways, I think that's somewhat interesting. But the religion of the science, the trust the science. So when we witness people who are coming out of it, but there are also like some people who are just. And some of them I know they're actually, you know, people that go to church with me and everything, but they're just very mainstream, very trust the mainstream messaging from universities, from Big Pharma, from media, from Hollywood, from banking, from Chase, like all the places where any kind of messaging comes down, and they just believe it because these are entities that are so big, and why would they all be lying? That's crazy. How are like realistic ways that you're seeing that we together, the country, people who care, that want to get these people out of this like blanket of deception? Like, what are effective ways to get people to snap out of it?
It's a great question, and it's the most important right now for people having these discussions, for people that know, that are, kind of awake. How do you wake others up? And I think that there's obviously a different answer for every situation, and there's a different answer for every person. But in general, I think the most important thing for us all to remember, because what we're essentially saying is like, what's the art of communication by which you can actually be heard, right? And not start a fight. Because these people are trained to put up these defensive walls anytime you start to question their narrative, because you're trying to seduce them into the untruth, into the conspiracies, right? And so the question is, how do you penetrate that armor of sort of ignorance? And often you're met with this this sort of fight or flight response, right? And so the art of getting inside of that conversation, like with the grace to keep them there and to keep their ears open, is, in my mind, it's about what is your goal in that conversation. A lot of us come into the conversation thinking, I need to come with facts that will convince them that I am right. And that is not how you convince someone that you're right. That's how you construct evidence. That's how you have a conversation with someone who already agrees with you, and you're figuring out what is right about something you're both trying to figure out is right. If someone thinks you're wrong and you're coming with facts in this day and age, what that does is it makes them come with facts. That creates an argument, that creates a debate, that creates a competition. And especially when the very veracity of everyone's facts has been questioned, that's a dead end approach. And inherently, I think, in my experience, the best way to get people to actually open their minds and not shut down is actually to not try to convince them that you're right at all. I think that the best way to convince other people that you're right is to shut up and listen to their perspective, right? Because everyone comes into a conversation expecting to be attacked with an argument, right? And especially around something like COVID or Big Pharma or Trump. And the moment that you say like, oh, so you're a Biden voter? Like, what do you like about Joe Biden? Right? And you're not, and I'm not saying try to get them in a gotcha either. I'm just saying try to understand them, right? And if they say they like Joe Biden because they really like his things, and you just ask them more questions. Be like, okay, like what about his policy did you like? Or and the point is that if they feel like you're trying to gotcha them, that's kind of obvious too. And you don't. The point is not to attack them. The point is to make them feel heard, because I think we never think this through, but when you're so used to having fights over things, like imagine if you are like a MAGA person, or you're like a red-pilled like conspiracy theorist, you know how you always get treated as though you're crazy? And anytime you enter a conversation with a liberal, you know that you're just going to get like attacked as being this racist MAGA. Hey, imagine if that liberal were to walk up to you and be like, what's the thing with Pizzagate? Like, I don't know about that. And you sound like you understand it and believe in it. Could I understand what's Pizzagate? And you start to explain it, and they're like, okay, I didn't know that. So and not necessarily saying, okay, I believe you and I agree with you. But imagine if that liberal asked you for questions all the way down that rabbit hole,
Right.
and then walked away. You would be like, what just happened? Like, is that even a liberal? Like, that's a cool liberal.
Right.
I want to hang out with that liberal. Right. And liberals don't get that experience either from us. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle, which is why I try to have these conversations in both directions, because I came from that side. And now I just hang out with conservatives more because they're more pro free speech, and I love it. So I'm starting to find the values over here I never had. But if you are in a conversation with someone that is so different than you that it's supposed to be a fight, and instead you come in and just ask them about their life and their opinions, and you just ask those questions all the way down and don't try to convince them of anything, don't try to argue with them, and then leave, you have just broken their brain. And they've had the experience of walking their own reasoning out loud all the way down their opinion. And most people's opinions are only one layer deep. Most people's opinions are like two YouTube videos deep. And beneath that, they're just making shit up. And once they say all that out loud, like, Hunter Biden's not even that bad. Like, he's fine. They're just overblowing it. It's like, all right, that's cool. Like, what has he done that's good? Or like, do you know about the other stuff? What's your opinion? Do you think the laptop's fake? And once they start being like, yeah, the laptop was like Russian disinformation, be like, I didn't know. I don't know one way or the other. What evidence did you kind of go by to prove that? It's like, well, the guy, they realized, I don't know his name, but there was the guy, and on Rachel Maddow, they told me he was the guy, and be like, I mean, I don't watch Rachel Maddow, so like, when did she, like, how much did she go into? Did she like show us? And they start to, and it's not to get a gotcha. It's just to be like, I don't understand how you constructed your understanding, so I'm trying to figure out how you constructed it, and that's just now I'll understand you better. And that just breaks people's brains. And it gives them the opportunity to be heard and to realize that like, oh, that feels good. And it also gives them an opportunity to hear themselves and realize like, oh, there's not necessarily a lot behind that opinion.
Their knowledge is not going beyond the talking points they were given. They meaning both sides of the equation.
Both sides,
I'm
sides
not saying
points.
it's only liberals here. This is both sides for sure. And that it's very superficial. You know, when we were talking last night, you did mention, and you mentioned just a minute ago, that you are, you know, liberal in a way. You know, so what does that word mean to you? What parts of that word would you say that you subscribe to in your belief system? And how do you think that's kind of like changed or changing or whatever? Because, you know, I hear liberalism and a lot of me just goes to the extreme part of it. And that's what's getting people all riled up online when I say, hey, on our special patriotic nights that we're doing this month, there's no liberals allowed because, you know, it's just like I'm not buying a free beer for somebody who wants boys' penises chopped off. It's not happening. So, and you're not a patriot, you know, if that's what you want, or if you want open borders, you're not. You can't. That is just the most asinine thing to say. I want open borders, and that's just a wanting the destruction of your country, which means that you cannot possibly be a patriot if you want open borders.
Yeah, that's not a liberal or conservative thing. That's just basic
dumb.
understanding of countries thing,
right?
Of nations. This is a great question, and I think I'm just now coming to this sort of conclusion in my brain and life in the last like 5-10 days, in that I was raised liberal and rather ignorant just because I never looked, and then I started to ask questions and I swung pretty conservative pretty quick because I was like, that's all lies, like go the other way, and then I kind of like swung back kind of middle, like, you know, pendulums kind of swing, and I think I'm getting to a point where I'm just sick of letting what the modern left liberal thing is. I'm sick of letting them take it away. It like liberalism was the part. I mean, liberal might not even be the right word. The Democratic Party, whatever word you choose for that, that was the party of anti-war during like the Vietnam era in a lot of ways. That was the party of anti-war during the George Bush era. That was the party of like anti-big corporations. I'll speak more about the Bush era because that's when I was actually alive. I wasn't there for Vietnam. And so like during that Bush era, it was like, that was the party calling out corporations. That was the party calling out Wall Street. That was the party calling out war. And so that means like that party was against Big Pharma back then. And somewhere that got co-opted by the mainstream narrative. And what I think happened is it used to be in the old world before the internet, the powers that be, all the big money in this world, it was easier to manipulate the side that holds on to tradition, because tradition can be, if you can kind of buy out the people that are talking about tradition, if you can buy out the people like that side inherently can be led if you're careful about how you do it and you pay enough money to do it. And it's easier to convince that side that war is justified in a classical way. Because all you need is like an enemy that is actually a threat to freedom and the people. And they wound up having that miraculously.
Amazing.
Yeah. But at a certain point with the internet, I think someone very smart up high realized that we have this greater good thing that we can use to just totally take that other party over. And that other party is so much more. So like conservatives in general, like that skews towards nationalism, which is its own form of control if you orchestrate that right. But liberalism skews towards communism and towards collectivism, which is socialism, which is a whole different form of control that lends itself to the digital age in a whole new way. Right. And so at a certain point, the powers that be, I think, flipped their control mechanism and tactics and went after the left and left the right, like somewhere between Afghanistan and Iraq and like Obama era into where we're at today. And so now the left is under full attack by that mainstream war machine in order to convince them to essentially take it over. And I think at a certain point, I realized that I am sick of letting them have the values of the left, because actually, like, if we were to construct what a liberal should be today, right? What a liberal should be, in my opinion, just my opinion, that has nothing to do with the values of saying that like kids should be able to consent to transgender surgeries. Nothing to do with that.
Right.
It probably has a little bit to do with saying that like we should respect all people, but I think that's a shared value amongst conservatives and liberals in the center zones of like, I don't necessarily think that it should be legal to do anything to like in general, but like, let's at least like be respectful. But liberalism is the classic, like the collectivism. That is what regulates a corporation, right? The conservative side is no, free markets. Corporations should be able to do what they want, and the free market will take care of it. And the liberal, like the liberal side is, there's a certain point at which you actually need a government to come in and regulate, because corporations otherwise can run roughshod over all of us. And so that's what, the more you learn and the more you kind of spend time on both sides, you realize that there's a reason why we need both sides. Like, it's yin and yang, it's male and female, not literally, but it's this balance of like, you need collectivism to hold society together, but you need individualism and conservatism in order to keep collectivism in check and preserve individual liberty, because the point of government is just to do just enough in order to make sure that nothing gets out of hand, and no more than that. And so you need both sides to check each other in a cogent and respectful conversation at all times in the middle. And obviously, what the powers that be do and want to do is to break that apart and send them as far away from each other as possible, to make it so that we've obscured the values on either side that are actually, positive, so that we just fight all the time from long range. So I don't know as I technically actually would fall more to the liberal left side than I do, but I think that at heart, like, I am far more open to things like I have no problem with gay people. I grew up around them my whole life. And I don't feel like there's any reason to change them or need to change them. It's like, do your thing, man. I love you. I got no problem with it. Like, I think we should be regulating the hell out of corporations. And I understand the conservative point that, like, there's a line where regulation and government can grow too big, and suddenly that's the problem. I think guns should be in every home. Everyone should be trained to use guns. So I have opinions on both sides. I think I don't want to let my identity as having grown up on that left side slip away just because right now the left is retarded.
Right.
I want to remember that I came from there, and in a lot of ways I can stand there, at least with one foot all the time, and represent the fact that we don't need to let that get taken from us, because that's an essential piece of the conversation that will bring us back. And if no one on the left is sane, there will be no sane left. But if those of us that are sane and do hold some of those beliefs that do fall on that side, stick by it, and remind us all that the left belongs in politics, it just needs to get taken back from the CIA. That's how we start to heal the divide, because the divide is because we've let them take both parties and just blow them out.
Speaking of CIA, so we're heading into night 2, and we finished yesterday. Recap is we hit up on corporations and banks and all the evil going through there. And tonight we're talking about spy heroes and CIA and what the CIA actually is and what we're told it is and the differences. What are your thoughts going into night 2?
Tonight is going to be spicy. Last night was so much fun. And if anyone that's watching this didn't get to see the talk from last night, it's like so worth tuning in, because getting to put it all together in one cogent presentation that's long enough to run through why it all connects and how it all connects, it changes the way that each piece is understood and makes sense. And going from an understanding of corporations and companies and the markets and all, like, those are the pieces that built the intelligence networks. The intelligence networks were built on the private world, not on the government. And so I'm so psyched to unpack this, because now we're going into all the secrets, we're going into all the dark, dirty stuff, all the actual conspiracies that are not theories, that are highly evidenceable. Because no one, like journalists don't talk about, covert operations. They don't talk about intelligence agencies. They don't talk about spy networks, because they're not supposed to, because they're involved in the spy networks. And so it's happening all over politics. It's happening all over all of our information spaces. These groups are involved in everything these days, and no one is, many people like me, journalists in the space, people like Whitney Webb, Johnny Vedmore, there's lots of people that are doing it, but it's not the mainstream news.
Right.
And so getting to expose all of that and kind of do it in a cogent way that lines it all up to knock it all the way down to, like, who's at the top of the chain right now, and what, like, organized crime and intelligence networks are like this, and they have been for a long time. And we're supposed to think of them as fighting each other, but they're actually in bed together. And in order to get the full picture of what's wrong with our world right now, we need to understand both of those players, and we need to, like, pull the sheets off of that bed and look at what's really going wrong. And both of those are places that we're not supposed to talk about. We get censored on over and over and over. And so having this in-person space, this uncensorable space, and pushing it out to platforms like X and Rumble that are not censored, at least not
less.
not as much. That is so exciting because we need more people to talk about it. And for anyone that doesn't know, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the entire history and present day state of intelligence networks, mostly the CIA and Mossad. And we're going to talk about the entire history and present state of organized crime, mostly the Jewish mafia or the Israeli mafia or whatever it is. And we're going to talk about how there's been, mafias and gangs and yakuzas, ethnic organized crime groups all throughout history. And the only one that we're not allowed to talk about is the current one that is extremely powerful, that is operating out of Israel, that involved the Jeffrey Epstein network, that we have clear evidence of. And so pulling the curtain off of that and exposing the actual criminal, like black market networks that are working with the intelligence agencies in those black market networks is like the number one job of all journalists right now, because it's the most censored topic on the internet.
As soon as we posted that we're doing these 4, and the 4th one is titled
the modern Jewish mob,
modern Jewish mob, the online accusations of Nazi, you're a Nazi, I'm a Nazi for hosting it, anti-Semite, these allegations start coming out. Are you an anti-Semite?
No, I think that actually, I mean, just like I'm saying with all the other kinds of people we're talking about right now, it's like I respect everyone's decency and humanity, and actually I think that the most anti-Semitic thing in this world is defending an organized crime ring that is using the cover of the Jewish religion to operate in sex trafficking and drug trafficking and warmongering, right? Like if I am in an identity group, like I am white male American, and if there's some group that's saying like, you can't criticize white male Americans because we're all good, but what they're actually doing is they're going out and doing skinhead white supremacist stuff and like killing a whole bunch of people, and they're sex trafficking girls, and it's literally like a white clan. It's like, I don't want those people in my group using my group as cover of like, you can't criticize white people, but white people are doing all these criminal things. It's not that Jewish people are doing anything bad. It's that there is a criminal organization within the Jewish religion and within the Jewish state of Israel that is using those labels as cover so that you can't even talk about the fact that like the Jewish mob is a very real thing. It's been one of the most prominent organized crime, shall we say, denominations for 100 years and more. And they were instrumental in a lot of the history of this nation, instrumental in the founding of the intelligence agencies that they are currently in bed with, instrumental in the founding of the blackmail networks and industries that Jeffrey Epstein is now, or was recently, a big part of. And they are instrumental in the government of Israel right now. And we know that for a fact. Like you can just learn that on Wikipedia, that there are people in the current government of Israel that are direct family members of current active Israeli mafia members. It's just like, it's all open facts. It's just this weird blanket where you're not allowed to talk about it because you're called an anti-Semite and you're called a Nazi. And like, what does a Nazi even mean? Like, have I committed a Holocaust? Like, have I hurt anyone? Because I've not actually, and I've not even committed any violence, and I'm not a violent person. It's like so we're disconnecting what the word means, and people don't even think it through. It's like, don't we want to clean up the house and get the criminals out so that the Jewish religion can be pure again?
Yeah. If there was a group of people claiming to be Christian that were out there doing crime syndicates and things like that, I would say let's identify those people immediately, shine light on that deception, put them in jail. I don't want them claiming to be Christian.
And there are a number of Jewish people that are doing that right now about this Jewish mafia situation that's going on, and they are heroes and they need to be uplifted and respected. But unfortunately, too many people are being fooled by this anti-Semitic narrative that is obviously tired and overused, that is just untrue.
What I said the other day to somebody was, if the screen said, the contemporary or the modern Italian mafia, nobody would have said anything.
No, exactly. The Japanese Yakuza, right? The black street gangs, like all of these things exist. And we're going to talk about why it works that way tonight.
And then it's followed by questions. And some of these questions come in and they have really nothing to do with what you talked about.
That's tons of fun,
which is great because people want to come and ask you, some questions, including we had 3 or 4 last night that were on the same vein. And it was, what are your thoughts so far on the Trump assassination attempt? We want to dive into that for just some quick thoughts. I know we're still waiting. We're still wanting to see what information comes in. But what are your quick thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, first off, thank God they missed. Whatever happened, thank God they missed. even if you're not a Trump supporter, you should be thanking God that they missed, because I don't want to live in the world where that succeeded and whatever followed. Like, that would have been the most divisive, dangerous, destructive thing in our country ever. And it's immediately apparent that the information coming in is carefully controlled, skewed, obfuscated, and bizarre. And the shooter that's getting, put in front of us, his name and everything, is the perfect image of a patsy. Like, people are starting to call him, Retardy Oswald is the name that Twitter has given him. And it's fitting and funny because he's just another one of the same vein of like lone gunman that could never have pulled this off on his own. If you actually look at the facts, at like how he got there, where he was, the shot he took, his history as a shooter, his age, his mental state, just all of these things that just add up to, obviously we don't know what happened yet, but we know that we're getting lies from the mainstream media, that they're trying to obfuscate the truth. And we know that X is pushing the envelope. Thank goodness we have X right now, because the reporting on X is so fast and effective. And sometimes it's wrong, but it's fast and it's putting stuff out, and it's forcing people to admit things. It's forcing truth to kind of stay ahead of the narrative. And I don't think we've seen the end of where that leads yet, because we have, hundreds of thousands of citizen journalists all around the world furiously digging through things on the internet, like people on the social media profiles of the alleged shooter and of someone who might be the shooter who's not who they're saying the shooter is, and watching both of those social media profiles get scrubbed in real time, because we have so many people that we can have eyes everywhere. And so the power of the decentralized information space is in full effect right now, and it's wonderful to watch it work. And the only thing I would say is everyone consuming this decentralized reporting on the ongoing developments is to just be careful about how sure you are in that reporting, and to let time play things out a little bit, to understand that these things break, and sometimes they're wrong, sometimes we've been misled, sometimes we're so let the trail kind of clarify, and just keep digging and keep digging and keep digging. And hopefully we'll find a version of the truth that's pretty close.
And I think that more so than just the general, obviously, traffic on X or anywhere else, people who are listening to you tend to be people who are doing more of that digging. If somebody came up to you and said, "Oh, wow, I don't know who you are. You have 2 million followers, amazing." How would you describe, if they asked you, how would you describe your audience?
Oh, my audience are people that just want a normal, rational world again, I think my audience comes from all political sides, all identities, all walks of life. And I think the common denominator in the people that follow me and jive with what I do is they're people that want the vibe shift. Like the piece that you were referencing the other day, there's this vibe shift that's going on where, like, we are sick of people being fake. We're sick of being lied to. We're sick of just deception and advertising and media. And all we want is to be able to speak the truth the way we see it, ask the questions the way we wonder them, and to look for answers in an honest way. And the moment that someone does that from the heart without filtering and putting all these, like, am I cool? Am I going to make money? Am I like going to be popular? Am I going to get canceled or censored? The moment you throw all of those questions out and just speak from the heart unfiltered and just look for a truth, or even if you're not in the truth seeking spaces, other things, people just want that real human experience of a genuine human that's not trying to do anything other than what they are. And for me, that is seeking the truth and finding answers. And so when you put that over the journalism space, you wind up with people that are curious to know what's going on and are sick of the bullshit.
I asked you about your shirt earlier, and I know that you do sell them. And I was looking at comments yesterday, and people were asking, where can I get one of those shirts? I think it was your other one. What was the other one yesterday?
Yesterday was no more bailouts.
No more bailouts.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones is food, not pharma. But defund Big Pharma is pretty close up there.
Yeah,
too.
I like food, not pharma.
Yeah.
I like to bring up topics people don't normally like to talk about. But as soon as you do anything, like you're trying to do something good, you're trying to help people understand the truth, you're trying to do all this, and then as soon as you introduce something to sell, all these people come out of the woodworks and call you a grifter. You, me, whatever.
Yep.
I like some of the comments you said. I don't remember when we talked about it yesterday, but what are your comments on those comments?
Yeah. I think we talked about it in the car ride home. And first off, you know, that's natural. People like to, you know, people are always going to come out and grift, you know, on the grift, whatever, you know, throw stones. And certainly grifting sucks. Like grifting, the act of like luring people in to try to sell them something just so you can sell them something. That is the exact thing I was just talking about of like, we're sick of that. Right. But everything in this world requires money and inputs, right? Every output requires input. And so every, you know, person on social media, every person doing journalism, everyone needs money and support. They need something to make it work. And so there's a difference between reeling someone in to sell them something and trying to make a living at what you're doing, right? And I think people are not nearly gracious enough with watching people try to make a living. But what I did is I just went full, shall we say, vibe shift when I started. And I founded this company, called it a clothing company, and then proceeded to never tell anyone that I sold clothing, even though I put it on my website, cancelthisclothingcompany.com, little plug there. But I never told anyone about it. And it was just hiding over there. And I'd made like 3 sales in like 5 months or something. And then this guy comes after me because I kind of pissed him off and he was trying to write a hit piece. And I was like, I kind of gave him the runaround and did a little dance on his grave. And he kind of threw the insult out at the end after he'd kind of gotten schooled of like, you're just a grifter that's here to sell shirts and you're a conspiracy theorist grifter. And his comment in that TikTok video just got filled with my audience being like, wait, bro, you sell shirts? And nobody knew. Yeah. And so then I used his comment like 5 months after starting the whole business and whatever, 4 months, I don't know. I used his comment to make another video to be like, yeah, actually, this is hilarious because none of you guys know it. And I like, check out my grift. And I actually went through my platform in the back end of my selling and showed every shirt order I had ever sold. And it was like 4 or 5 shirts in months. I'd made a total of like $14. I'm like, check out how great at grifting I am. And I used him to advertise my grift, which was not a grift at all. And then the shirt sales took off because suddenly everyone was like, oh shit, we can buy the shirts that you've been wearing this whole time. And it was, I mean, I just loved it. That's the vibe shift right there.
Yeah. By the way, we've said that like 4 times now, and that's Santiago Pliego. He wrote this Substack article called Vibe Shift, and Tucker picked it up and brought him on, and they talked about it. But it's like that, the shift that's happening with our society where people are just so desperate to just latch on to anything that's true and right. And because everybody's realizing, man, I'm so deceived. I'm so deceived on anything that pops up that's true and right. I want to latch on to that. And I think that's a great sign. I think it's a great sign that this, you know, people of this country and the world are ready to step up against the big pharmas, against the people, you know, that are gaining so much power and control and instilling fear in us and everything else. So it's all good. Last topic. So we were before we set up here, we were talking about some other guests that would be cool to have on our Salooncast, Old State Salooncast. And we brought up a few names, and then somehow the topic of porn came up. Yeah. And it's something that, and we don't have time to get too deep into it and everything. And there's so much more that I would want to learn on how to tackle that. But what I do know is that it's massively evil and causing massive problems to our country, to families, to marriages, to men actually being men and being good leaders and standing up for what's right and true. And even like, you know, taking away men's drive for sexuality, for women, for
everything.
Their
whole dopamine system hijacked.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's extremely damaging. It's just another one of the examples, including like you think of like the poisons, and it's just a multifaceted approach to weaken our country, and porn is a big part of it. Yeah. I would love to tackle it and try to get it weakened and expose it and everything else. And so trying to figure out how to do that. What are like just some general thoughts from you on that industry and how dangerous and damaging it is?
Yeah. My take on this is kind of nuanced, and it's hard to elaborate because a lot of people want the quick button fix. It's like ban all porn, like shame them all. You know, that's kind of like the manosphere cool thing to say right now. And like, cool, that's better than nothing.
And it's tempting for me to do that.
Yeah,
too.
It's better than silence, right? Yeah. And especially for people that are religious or people that are like, that are completely above, like people that are actually, you know, like I get it. But I think the unfortunate truth is that the sex industry has always been here because it is an inherent vice built into the sins of man, so to speak. And you can't erase that by like you when you tell a teenager don't do drugs because they're bad, that kind of does the opposite often. What you need to do is you need to teach the truth, like teach the real, like the reasoning, the underlying layers. You need to give healthier alternatives. You need to address the problem in a far more complex way. And the porn industry has grown so big partially because there's a lot of seditious forces pushing it to be so big and pushing it into our world, but also because um, there's an inherent tendency in human culture to create such an industry in the first place, and that is being manipulated and used to their advantage. But in order to solve it, I think that we need to address it far more complexly by doing things like creating the opportunity for whistleblowers to be safe. Because right now, it's an industry that's filled with crime and filled with trafficking and filled with horrible things done to women and children. And that needs to be broken open, and there's a veil of silence that is deadly, like literally deadly strong. And we need to find ways to make it acceptable for women that are inside of that industry to whistleblow on what is going on inside that industry. And I think that if we create this shame them to hell, ban it all mindset, we actually make it even more dangerous for women to whistleblow, and we create even stronger walls around it. Because the problem is that you're not going to actually put an end to them unless you somehow take down the entire global criminal networks. Like there's always a room in Romania where they can film a video.
Right.
But if you can break the walls and make it safe for women to come out and whistleblow on what's really going on in there, the drugs that are happening, the trafficking that's happening, the abuse and manipulation that's happening, the contracts that are being manipulated to take advantage of women and girls, like those are the kinds of things where suddenly you can crack it open, shine a light in there, and put criminals in jail. And the moment you can do that, you can start to regulate it better. You can start to get it out of, our Instagram feeds better. You can start to put it in the corner where it belongs, where we can then start to have healthy conversations with our kids and with ourselves about the addictive nature of that thing and how that thing does things to you that you don't even understand yet. And it will always exist somewhere in human society in some form because sin is built into what we are. That's the whole point of like avoiding the devil, is the devil can it arise within all of us at any time if you're not vigilant. And we need it in a corner where we have extracted all the manipulative darkness and crime that is holding it so strong right now, so that the women can get to safety, so that they can have, the ones that do choose to enter into it can at least do so in a way where they are not being manipulated, killed, trafficked, whatever's going on, drugs. And we can now have a conversation outside of it where it's not in our whole lives in the seditious way where everyone's afraid to talk about it because everyone's addicted to it and everyone's in some way crossing that line, and women want to become OnlyFans models and all. It's like, because that's another problem that we actually didn't talk about earlier that we shouldn't go too far down. But the problem is that we live in a world where the moment you have the technology of a camera and an internet, every single pretty girl in the world, inherently, there's no way you can stop it. They can sell their sexuality to men, regardless of what industry exists. And so the only way to stop that from happening is to uninvent the camera and the internet. And that's why I'm saying you can never erase it. All you can do is, and this is what I think is a more liberal belief, is like all you can do is address it intelligently and complexly and in a healthy way so that like women understand the risks, girls understand the risks, and have barriers put in place so it's not as easy as like posting TikTok videos of you dancing and suddenly you get all this attention and you're like, oh, I'd get more if I took my clothes off, right? Because that is a dangerous slippery slope for a 17-year-old girl that has no understanding of the consequences when she's 22, right? So we need a way to get the crime out of it, get the problem, get all that out of it, and make it healthier in what it is, so that the girls that are in it are living a healthy life. Because to be fair, like the girls that are doing it from a place where they're careful and empowered and intelligent about their financial decisions and making choices that they feel morally comfortable with, regardless of like my or your or anyone's judgments of them, they're making a killing off of what they're doing. And there are some in there that are doing it in a way that I think they'll be perfectly happy living their lives far more successfully than 99% of humans in this world, because they're getting paid so much money to do it. And so you're never going to be able to take that temptation away. I think all we can do is hopefully create an environment where the women that do choose to go down that path and suffer the consequences that are inherent to that path can do it in a way where they're not also risking drug abuse, death, trafficking, all these other things. And that can start to create a barrier where we can have more healthy conversations about what are the real consequences down the line. Because once the women can come out and talk about how it felt to be in the porn industry, what it did to them, to their souls, to their partnerships, to their drug habits, we need them to be able to come out and talk about it. Because until they can come out and talk about it, the 17-year-old girl will never know what she's getting herself into.
Yeah, and then the level of secrecy is, the more secret that is, the more evil can take place inside, and the more extreme that evil can be. But if it's if you don't think that you have any way of getting out alive, then you're going to end up being put in worse and worse and worse and worse situations where the extremeness of the pornography just gets worse and worse and more victimizing, and you further feel like you can't get out of it. And that nobody will ever think of you as a person worthwhile, and that there's no way you can financially afford to get out of it. There's no runway. So we were talking about, hey, there might be some ideas down the road to provide a solution for people who are stuck deep in these things, and provide a rescue team of sorts or whatever. I'm sure there's some out there already, obviously, but it's just a topic that the world needs to step up and shine light on. These people who are doing things illegally inside that industry, and every industry, should face a reckoning. And that's what I hope that we're coming up on, is that people who are doing all these evil things in the porn industry or the regular Hollywood, with the victimization of children and everything that's going on there, is that enough people will have enough guts to stand up at once and say, enough is enough. You're gonna face ramifications for this. And I think we're starting to see that happen.
And it starts with conversations like this.
Absolutely.
Because the thing is that it's a conversation that no one wants to have. It's uncomfortable because there's an awful lot of men that are uncomfortable having that conversation, because there's a lot of guilt built up in men. Yeah. And there's a lot of fear and shame and whatever built up in both sides of that equation. It's like, guys, it's time to grow up, deal with it all, talk about it. Like, you can be mature. It's like, we all have to do the work together. Our whole society has the problem. We're all a part of it. Until we're talking about it and actively working to be the solution, you are actively part of the problem.
More active solution happening tonight at Old State Saloon for night number 2. I just want to take the last few seconds here to say I am incredibly thankful for you doing this, and for the wisdom that you've shared, and just becoming a friend of yours. And I look forward to, helping fight all these battles, and linking up with the right people and connecting the right people, so that we can be most effective in getting everybody to understand what's going on. And if everybody, this is what I just say, it's not like we don't need everybody to do a miracle. We just need everybody to take one step forward towards what's right and true, and point out evil where it is, and the people who are making that evil happen, and let's all collectively put an end to it, starting local. Like, if you start local with your city council member or mayor, and this has nothing to do with my local city council member or mayor, I'm not saying that at all, but if you start local with whoever is representing whatever on your school board, and if they are evil, expose them, expose the evil at a local level, and everybody do that, and then we can start fighting this big time waves.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual, and it's been so cool to get here and actually meet you in person and see the good you're doing in this community in person, and it's wildly inspirational. And so this is just the first time of many, and I will be back many times in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, man.